Welcome to the Linux Saloon. This is a place to discuss tech, open source, and where Linux is always on tap. Each show will have something we're going to talk about. It could be a Linux project, generally a Linux distribution, but it could be centered around a desktop environment, application, anything that is Linux, tech, or open source related is on the table for discussion. And with me to help carry this thing along, my co-hosts, Eric and Eris. Thank you for being here. Apparently Steve can't be here because
he's irresponsible.
Because he's irresponsible, and he said something about how he didn't like the way my nose was shaped. So I don't blame him. I'm kidding. He didn't say that. He didn't. No. Well, how is everybody?
Excellent.
Oh, good.
Doing good. Yeah.
And the weather is, how is the weather still for you, Colin? Is it decent? Is it starting to get a little cool now?
Still warm, still hot, sticky, and yep, meant to be massive storms and rains yesterday, and it was like a flash in the pan.
So, and do you have any problem with scorpions right now? Like, are they crawling in your boots? You gotta shake out your boots.
Nah, scorpions aren't a thing over here. It's either snakes or spiders, but as long as they're in the roof.
How big are the spiders there?
They can be really small. The redbacks are really tiny, and they're not that big, but they can be deadly.
Yeah, I think everything in Australia is trying to kill you. If I remember correctly.
Well, they're more scared of you than what you are of them. It's just that if you just happen to get in their way, then.
I believe everything is poisonous, even koalas.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, as I said, nature's trying to really kill you. And if you look like where people are like actually inhabit in Australia, it's only like the very little rim of an edge around the continent, because the rest of the continent is trying to kill you. It's like the most brutal place on planet Earth, next to maybe Antarctica, but that's just trying to kill you in a different way.
I don't think it's as bad as what it's made out to be honest.
I know, but it's exciting for me to say that, because then in my mind you're like the toughest guy on here. You and Vince, you're like the two toughest people, because like you survive week to week, and so
that's right. Just go into the grocery store and we can imagine you like fighting through a herd of, I don't know,
kangaroos.
Yeah, kangaroos.
Kangaroos built like this.
And, yeah, I wouldn't want to get into a boxing match with a kangaroo. Have you seen some of those kangaroos? I mean, those kangaroos are ripped.
Oh, I know, mate. I don't know what they're eating out there. The eucalyptus leaves must be pretty protein filled.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. What does it have to do with Linux or tech? No, not at all. I need a lot of tech to keep you alive. But Eric, you said that I almost screwed this thing up. All right, so on the docket for today, we're gonna talk about our news flight. We'll check on the menu for we're gonna see what's on the menu for next week. We'll do a community free pour and our last call. But first, Eric, what have you been doing in Linux lately? You said something about some exploration going on, but not of distributions.
I do this about usually at least once a year, but I run through the gamut of the open source video editors and see what the state of the state is for the different offerings that are out there. We have so many options available to us in terms of open source video editors, and honestly, most of them have gotten to be pretty good for at least basic things. They all will let you do, simple edits, transitions, text overlays, things like that. But in terms of being efficient and, what I look for is when I'm editing my videos, I need to do a lot of cuts. And so for me, being able to cut, ins, outs, and cut pieces out and be able to do that quickly. And so that usually is my criteria for testing is, can I do the basic things, like I said, transitions and cuts and text overlays and stuff like that. And can I do it in a reasonably efficient manner? Is it stable enough? And, is it going to crash on me? That sort of thing, which used to be a much bigger problem than it is nowadays, it seems. So that's usually what I do. And what I'll do is I'll pick like a project that I'm working on and just go through the first few steps of importing video and audio clips and images and all that stuff, working with the clips, working with the timeline, cutting things, adding in audio and music tracks and playing with all of that. So I've done that recently with the list was Kdenlive, Shotcut, OpenShot, Flowblade, and Blender, along with Olive, and Olive, the 0.1 release or 1.1, something like that. It's the legacy one, not the alpha one. And all of them are completely capable, like I said, of doing the basics. But when it comes to titles and transitions and cuts, those are the three things that I find to be like the pain points for me. Kdenlive is very capable. There's obviously a lot of different things built into it. You can do lots of powerful things like scripting and things like that. And I know Michael Tennell, for example, has done a lot with Kdenlive and being able to take advantage of some of those more in-depth capabilities. I find it difficult because trimming in the timeline, there's no easy way to cut between here and here and then remove this and do like a ripple cut where it deletes the space. In Kdenlive, you cut and then you'll delete the piece that you cut, and then you have to do removing the space as a separate step. And that's just really inconvenient. It takes me a lot more time to work with that. And also I don't like their titles, the way that you have to do titles. So
in which one? In Kdenlive?
Kdenlive, yeah.
So let me ask you a question. All right, so I am very slow to like try other things. I have to force myself because I get easily, I don't want to say frustrated is the right word, but like where it's like I don't enjoy the process of having to figure out how something else works sometimes. So I've been using Kdenlive for quite some time, and I've been building like assets and whatnot. What I find very irritating with Kdenlive is that the ability to, and maybe I just don't know how to do it yet, but the ability to like export and have like some set like things, like a paste bin basically, where I can just pull in all these things. That's not actually easy to do. What I have to do to actually do that basically is have another session of Kdenlive open. I'll copy from another video and then into that. And it kind of annoys me. Like it'd be nice if I had like a, like an index of all the different little, reused things that I do would make my life a lot easier.
Yeah. And the things you're talking about is instead of a rendered clip that you'd bring in, you actually have like
an edited
embedded, you have like filters and things that are already configured and titles and everything. You're trying to bring all that with with all of the ability to manipulate it, not just a pre-rendered clip. Yeah. Right.
And the other thing too is like I've wanted to just export just sections for pre-rendered clips, like just like not a whole thing. That never works, and that irritates me.
Yeah.
But outside of that though, Kdenlive doesn't crash on me. So there's like my two like irritations, like when using it. I got a workaround, so it's fine. But outside of that, like it works very well for me. I kind of have I don't want to say groove is not the right word, but I'm getting a groove for doing things, and I've been producing more videos lately, and it's been fun, and I've not wanted to, throw a monitor across a room, so it's actually going very well for me.
Yeah, and there is something to be said for learning how a particular video editor works, because like most design software or creative type software, it does things its own way. And then you go into a different application, different video editor, and of course everything's completely different. All of the keyboard shortcuts and everything is nothing. If you know how to use one, it doesn't translate into the other one, other than just understanding concepts. So anyway, I'm not going to run through the litany of every single one, but just to suffice to say, it always seems like there's one thing that each editor does particularly poorly out of my list of things, and it keeps me from using and enjoying that particular editor. And that's true of all the ones that I listed. I would say probably Shotcut is closest to the right set of features for me. It's really nice where you actually to do transitions, you simply just take a video and pull it over top of the other clip, so that the clips are side by side, you grab the one to the right and you just start dragging it over top of the one to the left, and it will show like a hash mark. And it's creating the transition by you doing that. And it's really
like a crossfade.
It's so simple and so straightforward. And it does the crossfade by default, but then you can click in and choose a different transition type. The filters, the way that it has the panel for like having the clip and then the filters that are present on the clip, and then being able to the effects to be able to change the properties of the effects. It's very clean, very accessible. I find it very easy to work with. My biggest problem with Shotcut is it's kind of slow, and I don't know exactly what it is about the UI itself. Maybe it's every time I clip something or cut something, it has to redraw the thumbnails and the audio waveforms, and it's clunky. It's slow, and it feels slow, and it gets to be kind of a drag after and it feels like it gets slower the longer you're editing. So, and then exporting seems to take, like the export feature takes, and it says it's using hardware acceleration, but it seems to take a very long time. Blender's one of those ones where I look at and I go, Blender seems like something that would be amazingly powerful if I spent the time learning how to use it. And I watch tutorial videos and I read posts, and it's just like you said, Nate, I don't have the patience to spend. It would be dozens of hours, I feel like, to get proficient. And I just don't know that it's worth it for me.
Blender's not that hard to use, actually, because I used it for about, 16, 18 months, I think, Blender.
Yeah, I keep trying, but it's just dumb. Like, why do I have to tell it what the range to play is, right? I drag a clip into the timeline, and it doesn't know that I want the whole timeline to be selected. There's some really dumb things that it does that are just like,
but that's just knowing how the application works. So what you do is you have a preset, you make a preset and you make it really long. So most videos you put in will be taken up, but you select that preset, everything's done for you. All you have to do is put your video in, and then just set your the end piece when you're done, right? But what you do is you set the presets, you set it all up for yourself, and then you save that file, and that's your start file. You call it start file. That's what I did. And then you bring in that start file, then off you go, and everything's preset for you, right? Dust Geek made a pretty good video a little while ago on how to use Blender. And I took some notes down and got some notes for that. But once you get it set up and running, it's actually not that bad, because you don't have to worry about the end piece except when you're done.
I don't know what it is then, because they're really losing me on that, initial, because I've gone through that with, like, Reaper is a good example from a digital audio workstation standpoint. Reaper is completely custom UI. You have to learn how to use everything from scratch. There's a big learning curve, but once you get it and you have it all set up the way you want it, you can save that as the default. And then that when you open a new project or create a new project, that is your default. So I understand. I think that's what you mean with Blender as well. There's something about it. They lose me very quickly. Like, I get a half an hour into learning about it, and it's just, I don't know what it is. It just seems like, why am I having to do this way? It seems like they're trying to make the system do something it's not really supposed to do, when there is a video editor software that does all these things the way that you're supposed to do them for a video editor. That's probably just my own hang up, but that's what I run into, is like, I feel like Blender is not intended to do this, even though it just happens to work this way, and you can do it. So, and that's probably my own hang up. And if I got past it, maybe I would enjoy it, but just dumb things. Like, I drag and it separates the audio and the video, and it doesn't link them. And so I can easily, there's just so many things that it does by default that make no sense. And I think that's why I immediately just kind of say, this is not a video editor, So anyway,
it probably inherits some of the stuff that it does, because it's such a powerful piece of a powerful application.
The 3D modeling stuff. Yeah.
The 3D modeling and whatever. I think it just inherits maybe some of that stuff within it. And I think that's the problem as well. But I mean, I had a big problem with Kdenlive. I actually submitted some bugs because the waveform was so far out, it just made editing impossible. So I had to use something else in the meantime. Now I'm back on Kdenlive because now it's a lot of things have been fixed. The latest one's pretty good actually, so I quite like it. But
Okay.
I use Blender in between because I just could not get. I don't know. I found it once I seen that video from Dust Geek, it made a bit more sense on how to use it. So
I think Blender's one I want to use for sure. I want to learn how to use it because I think there's some things you can do in Blender you just can't do in the others because the animation and whatnot that's built into it. And it does 3D modeling too, but it's more like organic or like a wire mesh type modeling and whatnot, which I'm not good at, but I'd like to play around with that. Now, Penguin, you've had your hand up for a while. What is it you wanted to comment on?
Well, the slow UI that he was talking about with Shotcut. I'm just wondering, are you using the Flatpak version?
I'm not sure. I think so, probably.
I had that problem with the Flatpak version. I'm using Pop! OS right now, and I didn't realize that Shotcut was in the Ubuntu repository as well. So all I did was I removed the Flatpak version. I put the dev package in its place, and that instantly solved that problem.
Oh,
I think
okay.
there's an issue with that Flatpak problem. With that Flatpak, it was also doing it with the Snap as well. So it's got to be that containerized system that interferes with Shotcut. But I don't have that problem with a standard package. So I use Shotcut for my own channel, even though I haven't uploaded for like a month because I've been sick and stuff. But yeah, I actually like Shotcut. I used to use OpenShot, but lately OpenShot has made me want to use words that I won't use here, if you know what I mean, because it keeps on crashing on me all the time. Like every 5 minutes crash, every 5 minutes crash. And I used to use it like a year ago all the time. I never had that issue. So they've done something to it that makes it crash all the time. I don't know what it is.
Gotcha. So, like I said, I keep coming back to this about once a year, and I'll continue to do it and see where we are. But I will say that I am very impressed with how far some of these projects have come and how usable the software is in a relatively short amount of time. I'm thinking back even just like 5 years ago, it just didn't feel like there were really good options for any kind of open source video editing. And I feel like now there are enough choices that you're likely going to find something that will suit your needs and that you mesh with, that makes sense to you.
I think it's very cool that you checked all these things out and just kind of reviewed them again. Now, would you say at the end of the day, which ones, like if you were to rank them as far as usability from your perspective, because obviously everyone's a little bit different, what would be like the top 3 that you would recommend?
I think that most capable would probably have to be Kdenlive, just because I feel like it has so many things built into it that it's very powerful. And I think that if you can come to terms with doing things the way that it works, that you can really create some very interesting things. So I think it continues to get better all the time. It's gotten a lot better in the last few years. And I think it's probably single-handedly the most capable one. It's not the one I use because I just don't really enjoy editing in it, but I know it can do a lot. Shotcut's probably the one that I would say is the most capable in terms of all of the MLT framework. You've got all the effects and things in there, so it's very, very capable in terms of all of the possibilities. And I think the titles are very easy to work with. Cutting clips and mixing clips and multiple tracks and all that all works really, really well. There's just a couple little dumb things that I think they'll get to over time. And if that performance thing is just a matter of a different package, then that might be solved. Flowblade looks like one that is also very powerful, but I just haven't quite. It does everything differently than everything else. And I haven't taken the time to really learn it well enough. But I think they they make a pretty compelling argument in terms of why, if you spent the time learning, it would be worth your while.
Yeah, Flowblade's been the one that I kind of use. Because I don't do a ton of videos and I don't use do a lot of fancy stuff, and
Right.
It's been very functional and nice. I like the way it works.
Yeah,
That's cool.
Yeah, it does some really powerful things as well. So yeah, so I mean, I think you really can't go wrong. An OpenShot is probably the one that's like the iMovie, of the bunch, where it's literally big buttons and you drag this here and click this, and it's really kind of like the easy mode, I guess.
I got you.
And it just doesn't appeal to me. So yeah, but there you go. I mean, I think you really you're spoiled for choice at this point, which was not always the case.
I think what's great is in open source, especially like with video editors and whatnot, it's not like any of the options are getting worse. There was a time in my computer usage, like when there's a more proprietary software, when you loathe getting an update because it would make life worse for you. And I think it's really neat when you can say, wow, I'm looking forward to that update, which is actually why I ended up using a rolling distribution, because I seem to be excited about the changes. Very seldom am I unhappy with the change that's made. It's very, 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 very rare. So that's really good news. And I hope that they all continue to get better and push each other, because I think that's the key there, is that competition is not really the right word, but like rising tides raise all ships.
Yes.
Is a great
Yep.
It's great. So it's
This is my.
I would say Vince
Sorry,
in the
no.
chat tried iMovie and got confused. Back to Caden Live. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Colin.
I was going to say, my theory on video editors is get to know the crashes and get to know the bugs and work around them.
Yeah.
And then you take the chance of updating to the next one. For me, was Caden Live, and actually some of those bugs are gone, and then you got to get to know the new ones or the new crashes, which is actually very few and far between now in Caden Live. And if it does crash, it has a great little backup piece that it does where it recovers. Well, it's a recovery mode, and it recovers really well. So that's a good thing.
The crash has been really rare for me, but it always recovered everything right away. So that was it's like, I don't care if you crash as long as I don't lose work. I mean, really.
Yeah.
There was go ahead, Penguin.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, with OpenShot, it was like everything I did made it crash. And it didn't matter what version I went back to, with whatever app image I pulled down, it always crashed. It crashed with any package I had. So
That's funny, Matt. I know you kind of do video editing. I mean, it's mostly an academic sense of your video editing.
We will use the term low effort video editing, and we'll put it that way.
Right. Is it low? It's like you make low effort November like an all year round thing.
That's what the beard's for. Yeah, no, like I've done serious video editing, and then I've done more of the kind of shotgun, just kind of throw stuff out there, throw a title clip in the front and throw some audio and mess around with some audio tracks, and the lazy man audio video editing. For me, if like Eric, the most capable one currently is probably Caden Live. If you're going strictly for kind of that prosumer, which most YouTubers are going to be in level, I think Caden Live's a perfectly usable video editor for what most people will need. It fits just enough over the consumer level of, like, say, Premiere Elements, which is a very stripped down, not usable version of Premiere. And then you also, so if you're going to go that route, for those that want something that's kind of out of the box to use, like Colin was mentioning, that you kind of got to learn the UI for all these video editors. They're all different. They all have a different way of doing stuff. Shotcut, the way you add stuff is different than the way you add stuff in Flowblade and the way you add stuff in Caden Live. Like, I know because I use Shotcut on Windows. Like, you'll double click to add a file. You go into Shotcut, you click add, it'll add the file you already added. So it'll duplicate the file you already added. It does silly things like that because you have to go up and tell it to actually open a different file because that's the one it's copied into the project. Stuff like that kind of annoys me with Shotcut. But I've done Flowblade, I've done Pativi, I've done Kden Live. Generically, one that I don't think gets a lot of credit is Cinelera GG. If you want something that is like totally overkill for most people, that is definitely one. It takes a lot to understand and use it, but it is uber powerful. There's things like motion tracking. There's things like 8K raw editing. There's you can set up a server farm for rendering if you want. That like it's a bunch of different stuff thrown into it. The problem with that particular one is figure out which version you want, because there's the CV version, there's the HV version, there's the GG version. Open source at its finest, because it runs on the basically the company who makes it. Heroin Virtual, I think, is the name of the company. They do like a code dump once a year, and it's like, here you go. And then the CV version is the community version, which kind of takes this slow rolling approach. And then GG, which is the good guy edition, takes a much more rapid development approach. So one's about stability, one's more for commercial interest, and one's just the community saying, we're just going to take this and run, a blitz with it and see where we can go. So for me, I think Cinelera is actually one that probably should get a little more love than it does. It's got a lot of interesting stuff in it. UI could use a little bit of work though, because it's like the 3-pane gnomes, old GNOME system. So if you don't have multiple monitors, it ain't going to make any sense to you whatsoever, because the compositor, the viewer, the effects, and the timeline are all separate windows. If you have 4 monitors, makes total sense though, because you have one monitor for the viewer, one for the all that stuff.
Right.
But
right, and if you were a professional video editor, that would make sense to. Yeah.
Exactly. So for me, I'm with Eric though. I think Kden Live is probably the best one out of the bunch. I think Shotcut at least has the hardware rendering, though I know you can tie other projects using Shotcut in order to use the renderer for hardware stuff like NVENC and all the other kind of nonsensical stuff for GPU rendering and that stuff. Mm-hmm. It's just not the most fun way to set things up. So there's still some things we could do better with, like, GPU rendering would be kind of nice.
Yeah, so I am not a professional video editor, and I don't do many YouTube videos or such, but in the office, I do have an occasion where I'll just use Zoom to record myself doing like a webinar on a topic. My editing needs are really just to cut oohs and ahs and ums and pips and pops type of thing. Do you have a suggestion for me?
There's an app I believe called Video Trim, Vid Trim, something along those lines. I can't remember the exact name of it. It's
Vid Cutter.
That's what it is. It's a very simplistic. It's meant for cutting. So if you want to do jump cuts, basically, and time together, that's going to be your best option.
VidCut. All right, I'll take a look for that one. Thank you.
It's
That's
available as.
Is there an update? Because it didn't used to run on. It'd be great if there was an update to this, because I used to love this software, and it fell out. It wasn't maintained for a couple of years, and it looks like maybe there has been updates recently. That's awesome.
Yeah,
VidCutter is really good.
VidCutter. Okay.
Yeah, VidCutter.
Yeah, it's on Eric. It's on FlatHub now too, by the way.
Yeah, I see that. That's awesome.
And it looks like it may be in the Ubuntu store and such too.
Yeah, probably should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right. Well, thanks.
Let's move on to the news. We'll skip my my topic. So, very exciting news. GNOME 42 has been released for the next version of GNOME desktop environment. What's new is a system-wide dark style preference. Did you see a list of things they took out?
We know you love that.
Yeah, so I can only use dark theme. If it's not a dark theme, I'm not happy. And as some people like, maybe more of a mixture. The folder icon theme has been updated, so more modern approach to folder icons. GTK4 and libadwaita. While maybe not everyone is excited about the changes, there are plenty of benefits to this as well. The libadwaita library is a key component in the toolkit for GTK4 applications. The GTK4 port of the libhandy library that defines visual language of the GNOME desktop. Libadwaita and GTK4 changes are visible in every user interface of the entire desktop. For example, you can see the flat button, well-justified labels, new colors, rounded corners, refined controls, etc. People who are not pleased with this, the people who are not pleased with this is due to the limitations around customization. Libadwaita and GTK4 limits the customization of the GNOME shell, and in some ways applications as well. This is why the budget team has opted to switch away from GTK to a different toolkit. So if you'd like to learn more, you can actually check out This Week in Linux episode 168. In GNOME 42, they also revamped the system settings, and they made improvements to the screenshot tools UI as it is now built into the GNOME shell interface, accessible with the print screen key, rather than using a standalone app. Actually, I wonder about that. Does anyone here use screenshot tools? Yeah. Okay, so just about everybody uses a screenshot tool. I'm gonna guess that Thomas does too, just because his camera's off. So I'll pretend like he raised his hand. So I've the one that's in Plasma. Not to totally derail this. It's okay. It's pretty good. You can actually do annotations and everything.
You have a Spectacle?
Yeah, Spectacle. That one. Yeah. But Flame Shot to me just feels like the fastest, most like user friendly, easy to just get up and go. Is that crazy, or do you feel like Flame Shot should just be the standard?
Pretty much.
Flame Shot's awesome. Yeah, I've been using Flame Shot for years.
I was gonna say I love Flame Shot.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie.
Yeah, I liked its predecessor Scrot. I have that programmed all into my window managers. I've just never made the move to Flame Shot.
Yeah, Rome with the Dolphin said K-Snip, and I think K-Snip's good too. But I just felt like the process of going from grab a screenshot, do like your little edits, and then copy it or save it or whatever you want to do is just so much quicker in Flame Shot than it is in anything else. But again,
even XFCE screenshot grabber.
I'm gonna say I've never used it, but probably.
I was gonna say the problem that I take with like the GNOME screenshot, I don't know, whatever the screenshot I guess is what they're gonna call it, because GNOME simplifies just everything down to bare basics. The problem is it's literally you take a screenshot, it saves a screenshot, there is no editing, and that's it. It's a very Mac OS in how you want to take a screenshot. It's like screenshot, okay, have fun, and that's it. Whereas at least on the other way, it's not as bad with things like Flame Shot or Spectacle or any of those, because at least you can tweak and change or whatever you need to. I just find typical of GNOME, and how I find it is a lot of it's just basic at best. Basic functionality, cool, but don't go outside that box.
Yeah. So Dolphin says that XFCE4 screenshot is pretty basic except for its function to upload to Imgur. Is that how you say it? Imgur. Okay. I like Gur better, but Imgur, fine. Well, that's cool. I don't get. I imagine you have to probably set something up on the back end or in its underpinnings to make that work. Yeah, that's cool. That would be very handy. I don't know if I know that Flame Shot uploads, because I got bit by that. I hit enter instead of Control C, and it said upload where? I don't know. So as far as those features, is anyone here like a dark theme connoisseur aficionado? Yeah. Okay, a few of us.
It's not even an aficionado. It's necessary. Honestly, I can't handle full on white windows. It's just it literally makes my eyes hurt. Yep.
Yeah, we have no choice at work, and it is horrible.
It
I
does
can't handle anything other than a dark theme these days.
It actually causes me headaches to use a light theme, and so I won't even. Maybe headache's not the right word. It's like, not quite like a headache, but like a pressure.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense. Yeah.
It does. Yeah.
Like an eye pressure. And I'm glad to see there's been updates to the icon theme in GNOME, because it's looked very dated for quite some time, and I think it was basically Ubuntu and Pop that really made GNOME visually more pleasant, attractive. Yeah.
Yes, they got nice blue icons now. I think it was something like that instead of that
Yes.
beige type color that looked like it come from the 1970s before computers were invented.
But it actually, honestly, I think that folder color with the dark theme, to me at least, I don't know, maybe I was just so used to it that I think the blue actually looks a little ugly, personally.
There you go. Well, it just depends. It's just a, what can you call it? It's a
personal preference, I think.
personal preference, isn't it?
So with the change that happened in Plasma, where you can choose your accent color,
Mm-hmm.
as you might imagine, everything in my workspace is
Let me guess. Green.
Really?
nailed it.
Wow. I was just
Shades of
saying
green.
orange.
I wouldn't have guessed.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Matt, you know me so well.
It's almost like I do a show with you or something, Nate. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, sometimes when you decide to show up.
Oh,
Low internet section.
maybe
Well,
maybe it's just my reprieve week from getting away from you, Nate. You know,
I mean, it's understandable. I keep trying to get away from you too for 1 week, but that just never works out.
I think the one thing I will miss with the new screenshot tool, they've taken the ability away to timing. You know how you can delay the screenshot. I believe that ability has been removed on the new screenshot tool, which is not good because I use that quite a fair bit.
Are you using GNOME right now?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm using GNOME.
And what are you running GNOME on? What operating? What distribution?
I'm running it on Arch.
Okay.
But it hasn't updated to 42 yet. It's still on 4.5.
Oh, okay. I'm interesting to see then what the new what they changed in GNOME 42 for the screenshot utility. And I wonder if it's going to be customizable. Like if you want something else instead of it, if you want Flame Shot, will you be able to swap it out no problem and like bind print screen to that instead? I wonder if you can do that. I don't know.
Well, it's actually, they say that you hit the print screen and then the overlay comes up and then you got all the selections to make. So it's just a simple print screen thing.
Yep.
That's what they're saying anyway. So
As far as I know, unless they're changing GNOME, you should be able to rebind print screen to Flame Shot or anything else you're using. It's just by default your GNOME screenshot utility. But unless they've changed that in GNOME 42.
Well, we'll find out. I don't know when Tumbleweed's going to get it, but I imagine fairly soon. But doesn't mean I'm going to try it. They have different wallpapers for day and night now in GNOME 42. So if you use red shifting effects during nighttime in order to minimize the blue light, then you will value this. So that's cool. I like that idea of different wallpapers during day and night. Does anybody do that in now? I don't know if Plasma does that or not.
No,
yeah, night light.
I think
I don't
there's
ever
a
use the
couple of
light theme.
distros that do that.
Manjaro has that on Manjaro.
Manjaro,
Does that too.
what's that? The French one, the XFC.
Fedora
Voyager.
had this. Fedora had this before this release, I think, didn't they?
Maybe
They
they
did.
patched it in there.
This actually isn't keyed off of night shift. I don't know where you're reading that from, but it's actually keyed off of light and dark theme. So there are backgrounds that show a split between a light version and a dark version. If you have that background selected and you're on light mode, it shows one color. If you switch to dark mode, it shows a darker version of that.
Yeah, and then you
Gotcha.
can set up like Zorin, and there's a couple other distros
Yep.
that daytime light, nighttime dark,
Exactly.
and you can go to time of the sun and all that fun stuff. So it's just like Redshift.
Yep.
Robin Just Emery says that Tumbleweed already has GNOME 42. So there you go. Maybe he's running it. I don't know. He didn't say. So there's now support for input events to happen at full rate rather than being limited to the monitor refresh rate. So I don't know if that was an issue. Maybe for like gaming, does that become an issue?
What was
Matt,
it
I don't
again?
know.
Sorry.
Input events to happen at full rate rather than being limited to monitor refresh rate. So I imagine when it's input events, I imagine that would be like keyboard, mouse.
I was going to say, yeah, it's more to do with fluidity of interacting with the environment.
Okay.
That's literally all it is.
So it says it means we'll have lower input latency and improved responsiveness when the system is under load. This will be particularly beneficial for games and graphic applications.
Yeah.
Also has a new text editor app, which looks like a fairly powerful text editor. While also being a minimal approach, it seems to offer a curated set of features rather than trying to compete with the long-term players, although that could just be for the initial release of the software.
They did this with the terminal as well. It kind of like made it dumbed down, in my opinion. The text editor is very simplistic. It doesn't have any features of like an actual like powerful editor, and the terminal as well. So they already have an excellent text editing app in gedit, and they already have, why create new versions of something that already work really well? I argue that that's a waste of time, but that's
Isn't this the same
opinion.
that's in elementary? Is that how it works in elementary? I'm pretty sure it's got those circles you can choose dark or half dark or whatever.
It seems like it's inspired by that. I don't know if it's directly related to that, but yeah, that's the way elementary is.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know Daniel and those guys had worked with the GNOME devs to work on the style sheets and stuff for the dark themes and whatnot. So that's probably why there's a lot of elementary influence there then, if that's the case, because of that cross collaboration stuff that they were working on for that.
It sounded like, what they did with libadwaita for this release was really around supporting dark mode, being able to expose that as a setting in the settings panel. They haven't set in stone. There's a lot of sort of like, outcry because libadwaita takes away the ability for, ad hoc theming because of the way that it handles, it doesn't let you do custom style sheets, at least not in the way that it used to do it. So apparently they are going to work with people to have ways to, if you had to override it, but they said it's not going to be as trivial as it once was. So, and on one hand, I give them credit because it does add a certain consistency across the desktop. And really, if you just follow their guidelines and, but of course, not everybody's going to fit into that. And so if they do provide a way for people to override it in certain circumstances, I don't know. I like the fact that they're at least trying to have some consistency.
Honestly,
my question is, sorry.
I was going to say, I wouldn't expect a lot of apps to immediately transition to GTK4. Partially because, and that libadwaita, because those would go very hand in hand. I've been looking at transitioning a few different Drugger OS apps to GTK4, and the transition to GTK2 from GTK2 to GTK3 was pretty trivial. You literally change a number and a few functions here and there, and you're good to go as far as the Python bindings are concerned. With GTK4 and libadwaita, you don't just change that number and a dependency, you change the entire way that your app is architectured. It requires completely different classes and the way things interact. So while I think we do need to keep an eye on this for the future so we know what to expect, I don't think it's a huge deal immediately unless you use like native GNOME apps, because of how much work is involved in that transition.
Do you think it'll be quite a while before GTK3 applications then transition to GTK4?
Yeah, because at least from my experience, from what I see, most apps that are written for GTK are one of two things from what I see. They're either written in C, C++, or a similar dialect, or they're written in Python. And the reason for that is because with the C, C++, you get better performance. Whereas the Python, you can very quickly bang out an app. It works great, not hard to do at all. The Python way of doing things, because of that, is way easier and simple than anything you see in C++. But most apps tend to be that C, C++, Rust kind of paradigm. So because of that, any changes that I'm seeing, you can expect that there are way more for anybody doing a compiled language. And because of that, it didn't, once I understood what those changes were, it doesn't actually surprise me all that much that they actually made a new text editor app or new GNOME terminal app because of how much is changing in the backend. It may just be easier to just start from scratch, make a whole new one, and still support the old one for now while they're re-adding these features to the new app. It may not be quite as ideal of a situation because you now have two different terminals and two different text editors, and it can create confusion. But for those situations in particular, it may just be easier to do that. And then for other apps that are GTK, whatever you want to name, like Nemo or whatever, Nautilus, I would expect that the transition is going to take a while because, like I said, with my transitions, because most of my apps are Python and the amount of work I have to put in, I'm expecting an order of magnitude more for any of those other apps that are C++, C, Rust, you name it. And not only that, if you're not using a language that can natively use C libraries, you have to wait for those bindings to come out. Like I can just now start working on my Python apps because the Python bindings are now available, but they're only available in Ubuntu 22.04, so far as I'm aware. So this transition is going to take a while.
So, Thomas, what do you think of the lower input latency with the system under load, or the input being at full rate rather than being limited monitor refresh rate? How do you feel about that low latency?
I mean, don't get me wrong. If you're not sacrificing any other stuff for that lower latency, I'm all for it. But at the same time, apparently Wayland is supposed to be improving input latency as well. So, okay, is this really necessary? But whatever. What I'm more interested in toying with is there are a lot of functions that I relied on in GTK3 in order to make my apps work in specific ways. And it seems like a lot of those functions are no longer available. So I'm more interested in toying with and figuring out for those use cases as a developer, what am I expected to do instead? Because some of the suggestions that they've made don't work for me. Just for various different reasons. And one of my apps, I am transitioning to C++, at least in part, while also transitioning it to GTK4. So this is going to be fun.
For those that don't run GNOME now, has anything been talked about that might entice you to try GNOME to see how it'll work out for you by any of the changes?
No, honestly, I'm pretty set in my ways with my i3 desktop. I mean, right now I'm using GNOME because it's Pop OS. I haven't got it set up yet, but really I'm not interested in trying GNOME 42, at least for main workflow purposes.
Jen, were you going to say something about you?
You know, I never got used to GNOME, even when I used it, oh my God, 20 years ago. I don't know why, but me and GNOME never worked out. I every time I try to change something on it, there's like some kind of plugin or something. You know what I mean? It was just a challenge for me. I just can't get my head around it. But meaning it's more me than GNOME.
I know, Matt, I know you're a big GNOME fan.
Well, all I'm going to say is when I basically have to use the entire GNOME extensions website to actually make GNOME usable for me, it's just not. It's not for me. For me, the only usable version of GNOME currently is Budgie, and Budgie can be finicky at best.
I'll tell you what, I've been using GNOME for a little while now, and if I start recording a video, but I've got say an application on the screen that I'm recording on, it even to now takes me like a few seconds. Like, how do I get rid of that window without closing it? I can't minimize it, right? But I do have the, I think it's the super shift and, right, left arrows to move it to another monitor. But it still takes you that few seconds, like, how do I get rid of this window? Well, I want to minimize it, but I can't do that. It still takes me a little while to just think of those things when using GNOME. So,
well, I think for me, and again, this is me, not so much GNOME. Is I was a long time Unity user, so everything on my Plasma setup is like to the left. All the window controls, all that stuff's to the left, and I'm using Garuda, so I have to replace like 90% of what they default with. The thing that bothers me is you have to go up to the activity when you go up to the activities menu, and it gives you the GNOME overlay generically if you're using the mouse. For me, I like that overview, but it's annoying if I'm down in the bottom right hand corner to use the mouse to go all the way up to the activities menu. Yes, you can use the super key. I get it, or meta, whatever you want to call it. But that flow of movement to me interrupts what I'm doing. So for me, with me moving everything to the left, the menu, the way I have the menus structured, because I can go down to the pixel density of the menu. When I slide out a menu, because I always auto hide the taskbar or whatever you want to call it, the panel and get Plasma, it never covers up the actual close button because I shifted the close button one over so that when the menu pops out, I can always close the menu, go right into the menu and find what I need. So that's a specific workflow thing for me because that's how I jump applications. Whereas that doesn't coincide with how GNOME wants you to use GNOME, and people want to use GNOME, cool. But again, that's why I can't use GNOME because that's a very specific workflow.
You're actually right there, Matt, with the like my finger's always on the ready with the super key, to be honest, now using GNOME because, if I want to go to the menu and I've got apps pinned to the menu, I've got to hit the super key rather than go all the way up to the top left-hand corner. Because especially if I'm on the right-hand monitor, I've got to go all the way over to the left-hand monitor to do that. So yeah, the finger's always on the ready for the super button.
Yeah.
For that.
Well, I'm not a GNOME user, but I do appreciate the project because GNOME does things their own way. And, if you don't like it, don't use it. But I like that they're expressing it's kind of like an art to their art expression of a desktop environment. So good for them on continuing their march, but it's not for me. I might try it again one of these days, but I really gotta want to take the time. All right, and then there's some interesting gaming news. Anyone has anything else on GNOME they want to bring up or say comments? If not,
it's good.
It's good. All right, Adam.
I was gonna say one thing.
Sure.
You know how the gedit got replaced with text editor, and maps or GNOME maps is just maps. Why don't they rename GNOME Shell to just desktop environment?
Or Shell. Just call it Shell.
Why does it have to be called GNOME? Because you say that text editor, it shouldn't be called GNOME text editor because it's just too big or maybe too complicated. Why not just call it desktop environment?
I mean, we could go on an infinite regression, but someone already took the word electron, so.
Oh, Adam. Always with the zingers. All right. Well, excellent. Yeah, I think so my thought on that would be still have to call it GNOME desktop environment because it's GNOME desktop environment text editor. So you chain them all together like GNU Linux, so it's GNOME text editor. You could say something like that, maybe. That'd be my guess. Which editor is it or whatever. So, I mean, if you like it, use it. If you don't, don't GNOME. Yeah, Katie GNOME. It was an April Fool's thing, I think.
Prophetic wants to say something.
Prophetic's got his
Please say something.
I'm just waiting for GNOME to say, my bad, we got it wrong for an entire 3 series. And we decided to switch it and put the the dock on the bottom. Whoops. All that kerfuffle, all that fighting, not fighting, but you know how it is. Debate, the back and forth, they get ugly. The tough positions they took and the standing on it and not budging a little bit. All that to come to 42. And I'm just waiting. It's the audacity. I mean, of course, it's partly in jest, but it wouldn't hurt if some of the core leaders who were around since the change to GNOME 3 and those who are still around for GNOME 4 would just come out and say, we got it wrong, or sorry about that, but you know, sometimes you got to go through here to get to there, and we learned this is that. And no, they just said, here it is. Here's our expression of a desktop environment. And it's more traditional than it is non-traditional as GNOME 3 was. So I'm just still waiting for that. Like, my bad.
Didn't they
I
say,
hope that
or
day
was it
never
somebody?
comes.
Did, was
won't,
it
because
GNOME?
it isn't bad.
I don't want another traditional desktop. We have plenty of those. Like, I want something that has like a unique workflow that actually feels modern and feels different. Whereas, like, oh no, it went back to a taskbar and a system tray. Well, why not just use Plasma, right? Like, I want something that's different. I want something unique, and I don't want them to be like, here's GNOME 4. It's exactly like XFCE. Like, no, I don't want that.
GNOME 42 is more traditional in a lot of respects. Obviously, there's unique nuances to it and their expression of it, but it's a dock on the bottom, and you can move virtual desktops from left to right. If you want
So was
something
it-
new, I don't know what to tell you.
Was it the
Didn't they start
GNOME
that with
developers?
40?
Yeah, I think it was 40. They started that with GTK4.
Yes, 40. Yeah, so from GNOME 3.32 or whatever they ended 38 when it ended up stopping. 40 was the jump. Yeah, no one said I'm sorry or my bad or you know we were wrong or this is what we learned. You know, they went more traditional, and that's like kind of hilarious to me in some respect.
I think that wasn't GNOME that said something to the effect of the desktop is dead or something like that. It was an elementary or someone from elementary or GNOME. I don't remember who.
I don't
think there's-
remember that, but I kind of see what you mean. I remember vaguely hearing something along those specs from one of their blogs. That's kind of hard because the blogs are fragmented. Like, you know, there's GNOME official blogs, and they got some developers who blog all around. So it's kind of hard to see what's the official take sometimes and why they do certain things because it's still like their readings are all over the place. But yeah, like I get, no, don't get me wrong. Sometimes you have to experiment and explore, and you have to be committed to something before you decide to refine it some more, and we have to walk things back. So it's all good, but it is someone has to eat some humble pie around here, and it'd be nice to see some of that.
There has been posts from the GNOME domain that are supposedly not speaking for gnomes, and I have never understood that. How you post your non-official GNOME like message there and saying you don't speak for the project, but you're using the domain to post it on.
Very confusing, yeah.
It is confusing.
I've read opinions or opinion pieces in places where they talk about how most of the young ones coming up are so used to using like an Android phone or an iPhone or whatever, and that work paradigm where you're just using the icons and whatever, that's the way GNOME is going, in that direction, because that's the way a lot of people are now used to it. Whether it's a correct desktop flow or not, I don't know. I find it okay, but if you use GNOME correctly, you'll find the workflow pretty good. You will stumble across some things that are annoying, but that's some opinion pieces I've read. I don't know whether anyone else has read that before, but
I remember the first time I met Matt, and I was joking around doing like a random show where we just talked about how much we bash GNOME. It was like kind of in jest. Do you remember those days, Matt?
Now Matt's not here. I think he's gone.
Oh, I guess he just dropped off. I'll post a link. But it was back in the day, and we had like a random like weekly thing that we did like 3 episodes of. Like it was a random thing we did on Tuesdays, and one of the memes of the thing was just bashing on GNOME and that kind of thing. And as confusing as it could be sometimes, it is beneficial to read up on what GNOME tries when they try to justify some of their things. Because I went from GNOME hating and bashing to, okay, I can tolerate certain elements, and I actually like a lot of parts of GNOME and the workflow experience and the experimental, decision making with like the UI and all that stuff. I don't like how presumptuous sometimes they come off, or how matter of fact they come across, as if they did some massive UX study and confirmed the studies and the findings as this. They haven't done that in many, many years, actually. And so that's the only thing I kind of find like troubling sometimes, and then that's why, going back to my original statement, it's the irony that they're going back to a panel on the bottom, and the workspaces go from left to right, and you can swap, and that's just kind of the irony of that is not lost on me.
I think if they was to put the panel on the bottom, I think that would make more sense, because everything would be integrated in one working little area. I think that would make a lot of sense. I have read something that they were talking about that, but it might have been just an idea. But that makes a lot of sense that would have to be down there for a better workflow. But maybe I don't know. I mean, your workflow pretty much for GNOME, regardless where the panel is, if you think about it, is just hit the super button and type to get your application.
That's all I do. I mean, I did a month of using the panel setup on POP, and I've just removed it because I found myself slower looking for what I wanted to punch. Now I removed it again, and just I personally don't need a panel. Take a lot out. I'm customizing my PEP install, and like I did before with PEP 10, and I've made it very GNOME-like in its usage. I just find that workflow very easy. I don't need a panel.
I don't know about you, Steve, but sometimes, when it gets too close to bedtime, I'm getting tired. I can't be bothered typing.
But you don't have to type out a full sentence. It's like
you just want to
Telegram,
use the mouse,
and it remembers your most used. Instead of terminal, you can do TE, and if you don't, if you use Telegram a lot, that's going to come up first. If you use your terminal a lot, that's going to come up first. And that's where that is nice.
To me,
oh,
sorry.
Yeah, go on.
Ahead.
No, go on, Eris.
I was going to say, to me, GNOME seems like a full window manager. You're supposed to use a lot of workspaces, virtual workspaces, and the workflow is you use a launcher to open your apps, and then you switch workspaces to open another app, and so on and so on. And it seems like a window manager to me. Of course, it's not the tiling, but it's like the same approach, I think. And the way the menu is, I forget what it's called, but the screen where it comes on all the icons, it seems like they're trying to do like an iOS, Android kind of thing. But I personally never use it. I would just search for it because it takes forever to organize that if you want to organize it, or if you want to like look for something that way. So I end up just launching anyways, which is basically the window manager approach.
I personally don't like the Android approach for interacting with my device. Maybe that's why I don't like the GNOME approach. I add more controls to my window title bars because I want to be able to lower it, like force it lower and force it above things, because I use that all the time for various reasons when I'm going between documents or going between applications and whatnot. Sometimes I want it to be persistently on top, so I've actually added controls to my my desktop environment. But it's interesting, the minimalist approach. It doesn't really work well for me at all.
But GNOME has if you right click on the top title bar, you can keep above something always on top. Yeah, always on top. Yeah.
Yeah, and Katie has that as well, but I added that button so I can actually see that I get that immediate user feedback. I can see the indicator, right. and I like having all my information along the bottom because I like to check the periodically. I like right now I check the time. I got seconds ticking, and I can see how stressed my machine is, like by seeing how many cores are kicking up and how much. And so I like having constant like nerdy output all the time, like what's going on. I don't want my computer interaction to be a mystery. No, it should be doing anything that I don't know. So that's how I like to use it. What do you say, Penguin?
Well, I kind of agree with you on that one. As far as having all the nerdy outputs. As a matter of fact, on my other laptop, I have to have that output because it's got such a low-end processor in it. If I'm not paying attention to that, or if I'm not paying attention to the RAM on that, I will crash that laptop like that if I don't know exactly what I'm doing. But I even on my i3 setup, I even have that kind of output programmed on my Polybuzz setup as well. So I mean, I just like to see it.
Yeah, it's like a security blanket for me.
Yeah, certainly it is. But as far as GNOME goes, I just think it just takes up too much system resources, and I just never have got grasped its workflow. I've always I have a video of what I did a long time ago about how I converted GNOME to a traditional workflow, but then I'm just like, why didn't I just use XFCE when I did that? So,
sure. What do you got, Mark?
But yeah, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to mention that, I just was looking up the Ubuntu 22.04 release that'll be coming out next month. And of course, GNOME 42 will ship in that. And while I'm not, I think there's definitely some prettier desktops. The work that they're doing, the work that GNOME did, and having that in Ubuntu, if that gets more general users, into Unix, into Linux. I'm all for it. I'm glad they're doing, keeping up the good work, right? So.
Yeah, I agree. Colin, what did you have to say?
I was going to elaborate on what Penguin said. I have set up my desktop on GNOME to be like the bottom panel and everything as well, which you can do using dash to panel. And so forth. And then you say to yourself, why do that? Because I can just use another operating system that's got that set up already.
Because it's not just that.
It's not just that, because you got the activities overview and stuff that you can just hit, and you've got that. So you got that traditional setup. You also got the activities overview, which I really love to use.
Yep.
Yeah. Best of both worlds.
GNOME is very keyboard centric.
I don't use any of that. So even on this Pop OS, where I forced myself to use GNOME for a while, just because I wanted to see what Pop OS had done with Pop Shell and all that stuff, I still don't use the activities overview. So it's not a feature I like. It's not a feature I use. Right. So I might as well just go to XFC where it's all set up instead of going through the hour and a half to set it all up.
Now, I think it'd be a good segue to, since who brought it up? Was it Colin or Mark brought it up? I think it was Mark. So Ubuntu 22.04 LTS gets Wayland by default. Who do you think they did this before? I thought some years back they tried going Wayland, or that was Fedora. Who was it? I don't know.
Actually, Ubuntu did that for 18.04, but then they quickly rolled that back because then they realized all graphics cards didn't support Wayland at that time. They were having a bunch of problems. But yeah, it was on 18.04 for 2 months, and then they switched it back.
So there are limitations. It's only available for people with hardware that supports using the NVIDIA 510 series or newer, or if you're using Intel and AMD Radeon graphics. But the NVIDIA proprietary driver has continued defaulting to the GNOME X org session. It looks like over the past several months, NVIDIA has been working to address bugs in their Wayland support, and most notably having implemented generic buffer manager support. Another cool thing about this news is that this is a true example of the value of open source. This is work is not just thanks to NVIDIA themselves, but also a collaboration with Red Hat and Fedora, resulting in a very valuable benefit to the entire Linux ecosystem. So that's exciting. We have a lot of Ubuntu users as their primary distro of choice. The Penguin. Anybody else? Oh, Mark. No,
Well, mine is Papa West, but it's the same. It's almost the same thing. So
It's
similar base.
Not.
Well, the base is
Yeah, the base
the
is
same. It's interesting because when I first started participating in Biddle in 2018, almost everybody was using an Ubuntu or Ubuntu derivative, and now it seems to have I don't know if fragmented is the right word, but it seems to be that it's shifted a little bit. I know everything kind of shifts around and changes over time. Then go after the new shiny. So do you think that Wayland by default is a good move, or do you think it's ready?
I think it has to happen. We can't just keep pretending like the Xorg and Wayland can coexist indefinitely. For the people that are holdouts, I think everybody who knows well enough to have an informed opinion at this point sees the value of Wayland and really wants to move forward toward it. And I think if distributions don't pave the way, don't lead the way and make these tough decisions, then things are never going to change.
What do you got, Penguin?
Oh, I almost forgot to unmute my microphone. There are a couple concerns I would have to that. First of all, does the NVIDIA driver now support Wayland, or does anyone know that?
It's NVIDIA 510 series driver or newer that does.
So now they're starting to support it. That was my main concern, because up till about now, they have never supported Wayland. It's never worked. But like some of the older hardware is going to have some really tough times with Wayland. And like my older laptop, yeah, I've tried Wayland on it, and it just does not cooperate whatsoever. So as long as they keep the support for Xorg to fall back on, I think it's okay. But you really have to think about, is Wayland ready, and is the driver support there yet? And it's getting there. I'm not sure if it's there at the moment. I mean,
every so often I like to try Wayland to see if I can use it. And there's just a few things that some of the applications are just not ready for Wayland. I think Wayland as a technology, I believe, is ready, but I think it's not all the switches are flipped in all the other applications. Like something that I use all the time, I know that Peter used it. I use the version of Synergy. I think you use Barium, I believe. Is that true?
Barrier.
I'm sorry. That does not support Wayland. So what I have here is a setup. I have my primary computer that does all the streaming stuff, or all the OBS and Zoom and everything else. Then I have a separate computer that I actually use for the communication and for managing the stream at the YouTube area. And I can't move my mouse. I couldn't use that ability of like Synergy to be able to manipulate another computer or whatever.
Yeah.
That feature's not implemented yet. So that's kind of my holdout. Also, some of the OBS tools are not quite ready for Wayland. So that's the other issue too. But as far as like everything else, it feels way smoother. Like the actual user experience outside of those, like I'm kind of an edge case. I would say Wayland is a much nicer user experience. Everything just seems so much buttery smooth. I don't know if you've experienced that, Eric, in your usage of Wayland.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, Wayland, it's noticeably different in many cases for those types of things, and I think it's just it's purpose built. It's a modern tool. That we've been, even the people that maintain X at this point are like, we can't keep doing this. It isn't going to work. So anyway,
Wayland is maintained by Xorg. I'm quite sure it's the same. You go to Xorg for the Wayland team, so it's not like it's the next generation of an old concept of how to display things, I guess.
Right. And it's hugely complicated. There's a reason that it wasn't just like, oh, okay, yeah, let's just start using it. I mean, there's a lot of things to consider, and it is difficult. And I don't think it's a decision that should be made lightly, but I do still think that it's just the best unfortunately the best way to just move forward. And I think
Mhm.
NVIDIA was one of those last key points where you just couldn't use it on NVIDIA. So you couldn't enable the Wayland session by default because, you know, there's a large portion of people using NVIDIA GPUs. So if that has been solved, then, you know, that I think that was probably the biggest single thing, problem that was facing the deployment, the rollout. So.
I have noticed too that using Wayland over X, if you like monitor like your power consumption on a laptop, it is less using Wayland. I have tested it a few times. It is a less resource intense. So it does seem like the way forward for sure.
Yeah, I actually do agree with you. It is a better way of rendering your desktop. However, I'm just concerned about some of the legacy support with Wayland at the moment, and like Nate was coming up with like things like OBS tools, and developers are still not supporting Wayland when they should be, because Wayland is the next step for Linux as far as desktop servers. Also, like XFCE, does XFCE now support Wayland now?
I don't think
Because I know
so.
that Dave didn't.
No, they don't. The only people who support Wayland, I think, is Plasma, to a limited extent, in GNOME. And I don't
Yeah,
think
yeah,
anybody
that's
else
what
does.
I thought. And there is an i3 version for Wayland as well. It's not called i3, but what was it called? I don't remember, but it's just also trying to get those desktops environments to support Wayland as well.
Well, the good news is that it's not going away, right? It's X11 will still be there upon login, where you can switch out, and there's going to be distros that default to it. It might be a little jarring for those people who are running super legacy stuff, but that's the good news about open source, is that the cuts to change from one thing to another isn't always clean, so they have options. Thank goodness.
Exactly. As long as they keep like that fallback in place, I don't necessarily see a problem with them moving on.
Well,
has anyone had bugs with Wayland? Like, I've seen a few glitches here and there. I have an NVIDIA laptop. I'm just curious, have you guys observed like jarring, game stopping issues with Wayland, or is it pretty much ironed out now for the most part?
There are some issues like with some applications, as far as I remember if it was like a drag drop or something like that I couldn't do with Wayland, wasn't working right. Like, it was just little things here and there, like creature comforts that I'm used to using,
Yeah.
you know, X11, that it didn't work in Wayland. It's just it'll iron itself out eventually. It's not like nothing's a showstopper there as far as little glitches or little lost features. It's just a matter of, you know, getting them all worked out. And it could have been because maybe the application didn't support Wayland directly, or I don't really know what the issue was. But there's also some lack of functionality in OBS with Wayland as well. I can't crop windows, like capture and crop windows and such. Maybe there's a way to do it. I just don't know how. But it's very close. It really is.
I think so too.
Yeah, some of that Wayland stuff is tied into with Pipewire also. And one of the things I run into with Discord is that if I go to stream, I don't have audio. I can only capture the video portion. I don't know why, but it's kind of a thing with that. But my workaround is the fact that Pipewire is so good about being able to arbitrarily connect any input to output or output to input, that I can just take stuff from, say, if I'm streaming a web browser, I can plug it right in, just like I plug in like my guitar to Zoom or wherever. So that's some pretty cool stuff that's coming on there. I posted a link to an article in the in this chat and in the Telegram from Hackaday, and they covered some of that stuff and had some little tips in there that was pretty cool with Pipewire, but it goes along hand in hand with what you're talking about with Wayland. Just a side note there.
Script Draw, our resident Pipewire advocate enthusiast.
Recent convert, maybe. I still think that because well, if you read that Hackaday article, they mention the fact that right now we're in the process of getting out of the woods from where we were with Pulse Audio, because I remember at one time they bring up the fact that one time we were like, you know what, just uninstall Pulse Audio and go to ALSA because it breaks everything. And I'm on Fedora, which is where I guess the dev that does the maintaining for Pipewire and all that stuff is with Red Hat. So I'm having a good experience with Wayland and Pipewire and all of that, and it's getting better and it's getting better.
Yeah, I've had good experience with Pipewire, so it seems like that transition's been a lot smoother from Pulse Audio to Pipewire than it was from ALSA to Pulse Audio. So
at least for the common user, I think for the pro audio people, we're always lag behind a little bit.
Just because you can't afford to make updates to things because it can break. You know, you put a lot of effort into setting up your workflows and configurations and stuff, and you know, one update can really blow things up.
The most recent update that blew things up, even with using Pipewire and figuring out the more of the back end stuff, was there was some updates with Python 3.10 that broke stuff in Carla, which is the plugin host and Patch Bay, and it caused all the modules every time you would load up your save file for whatever your layout, your Patch Bay was, all the modules would just go to one complete ridiculous corner of the map and on the screen, and they wouldn't load right. Some of that stuff is now fixed. There's a lot of updates that FalkXT has done in that regard, and everything is working as it should now. My only endeavor now at this point in time is to figure out the back end portions and where all the config files are, and figure out how to maintain configurations through updates, because it seems like a lot of the Pipewire updates, when they come in, they reset everything. So that's the thing I'm at right now. But things are getting better and much easier.
Do you do anything with MIDI?
I have done stuff with MIDI. I've also used OSC. There's a really cool app if you're an iOS person, or even on Android. You can do Touch OSC, and you can create custom. Like I had a touch screen. I had an old tablet I made a touch screen control surface out of, and the touchscreen control surfaces are really cool. So if you use OSC, that's a network protocol, and you can anything that's on your LAN, you can do that, and you can also do some MIDI over LAN with. I don't know if Pipewire has the MIDI and the audio over the LAN capabilities yet. I do know that OSC is its own thing. So if you have a client that can accept an OSC, you just set the ports, and there you go. You just run with it. So
how would you do that with Pulse Audio OSC?
It's its own thing. The client itself has to accept it. And so the OSC then there are ways to convert OSC to MIDI, and there are plugins for that, or modules, something for it. I've done it before. I haven't messed with it in a long time, but Touch OSC, if you look that up, there's quite a bit of documentation on it. If you like automation and things, some OSC is actually really easy to hook up as long as you have, right, like I said, the client and that can accept it. And the cool thing about OSC is the way you address, say I wanted to automate a slider function in my DAW, like a volume, like I have a channel that I want to change with my controller. I would just go and address it via a URL. You put the host name in with the port, and then you do the // and it has its own directory structure, so to speak. And you would set it up both in your like your DAW or your client that's receiving, and then you also set it up on the client with that sending. And there's a back and forth. I think you use two different ports, one or two, might be two, could be wrong, but you have to have it set so it can go back and forth. So that way, if you modify something on one end, it'll show up on the other, and vice versa. It's super low latency too. It's nice.
Even over the network.
Yes, because
Really?
it's just. I mean, it's not it's not bandwidth intensive. It's
Okay.
sending it's just sending a, hey, this is where it needs
A
to
data
be.
stream.
Yeah. This is the number, negative 128 to positive 128 or 0 to whatever.
Amazing.
That kind of stuff.
I think it's amazing. It's
Look up
absolutely amazing.
OSC. You would like OSC, I think.
I did. Touch OSC. I already got it. It's an open tab. It's part of my follow-up now.
There you go.
That's cool. I have an old Korg N364, and I got a MIDI to USB module, and apparently there's a way to do a dump of all the like MIDI sequences on there. I just haven't figured it out yet. I haven't taken the time though either, but I gotta want to dump whatever's on there off of it and then reset the whole thing, because someone played with like the tuning of it somehow. I don't know how that happened, but so it sounds terrible. So sounds like a bad piano.
Later after the stream, I want to pick your brain on some automation stuff. I put some LEDs in my kitchen and I have ideas. I don't know.
Good.
So.
Oh, good. I'm already excited. All right. Well, very cool. It's a great article. I did put that in the notes there for people to check that out later. So another exciting bit of application news: Fish Shell 3.4 was released. Now, has anyone ever used the Fish Shell? So it's a user-friendly.
I tried to. Sorry, Pro.
What were you gonna say, Prophetic?
I was saying no, but I would love to hear about how people would like to use it, because I'm like, I just got my terminal, my regular terminal. I'm good. Like, what's the game changer that Fish provides?
Well, so it's the friendly interactive shell is what it stands for. I believe it's for an interactive shell, but I think it's the fun shell. Everything's color coded. It helps you along in the process. So like if you let's say you don't remember what like the option was, and you hit tab, it'll actually start to like give you all the different options, and then you can just basically like arrow over to whatever it is you want. It makes it so easy to use the command line, like to the point where I would almost call the terminal user friendly because of Fish Shell. I don't use it as a system level. I just use it like within console on KDE or in Plasma, because it's just easier that way. But so it has the features of Fish Shell. There's auto suggesting. You can do some scripting. The man page completion. It supports 24-bit true color and has a web-based configuration tool. So the improvements in 3.4 improves upon the command substitution syntax. So set, get, how to have a like for the function options, like the dash function options, to set a variable in a function, top scope, performance improvements for globbing. I don't know what that means. Support for disabling auto suggestions, and a wide range of scripting and interactivity improvements. So, here's this. File globbing is an operation that recognizes patterns and does the job of the file path expansion. So, like, it remembers some of the commands you use the most, and so it's very quick to get to something you use all the time, essentially, also. So you don't have to go into your bash history. And it's really very cool. And I super appreciate how easy and how much fun Fish Shell makes the terminal. I even did an article on my website on that. I'll have to bring that up.
Did you? Yeah, I like Fish. I played with it. It's just different enough from Bash that I can't remember what it was. There were like 2 or 3 things that it did that it was trying to be helpful, that it was just a little too helpful. And some of the auto completions and things like that, I think that might have, it seems like it's going to be really helpful, but sometimes it does just sort of, it doesn't get it right, I guess. But the colorations, some of the things it does is definitely, like, you look at it and then you go, well, why don't we have more modern, takes on that? And but yeah, no, Fish is really cool. If you haven't tried it, it's definitely worth trying, just to see what it brings to the table, because I think a lot of people would actually really enjoy using it.
Here's what I like too. If you type in a command and it's wrong, it's automatically read. So you see what you did wrong right away.
Right.
And let me tell you how often I get things wrong. All the time. So without the globbing, the autocomplete feature of it kind of helps me along in the process as well. It's really it's a lot of fun to use, and I get lots of smiles using it for sure.
Well, and here I've played it off and on with it, and the only thing is I've tried to set my default shell to fish before, but then of course that's always caused major problems. So that's one of the major reasons why I don't use it, is because a lot of the scripting I do is written in Bash. So, and if you go and you run your script, you run that script in Fish, it's not going to work. But
actually, I have no issues. If you actually run, if it's a Bash script, you just have to start it correctly, the sh/bash or something like that, question mark. I can't remember what the exact syntax is. Fish will tell me, then it doesn't matter. But most of all the syntax is the same. It's just like a user.
So you have to change the shebang at the top of it to the
Bash.
So from Bash to Fish, and it should work.
No, just do, if it's a Bash script, just put the Bash thing at the very top.
Oh,
it's
well, I've never actually I've actually had problems doing that with Fish, but the things that I really like about it is the autocomplete. But yeah, I've had the problem with it being too helpful, and sometimes like when I was trying to find a specific file and try to go and execute a program just because of the autocomplete feature, if I wasn't paying attention. But I like the fact that also it's got that drop down feature as well. When you're looking for files, you can just drop it down instead of the traditional Bash thing by filling in. Then you type in part of it, you press tab, and then it fills in up to a certain part. Then you have to go and type in again. I had some problems with that. But other than that, I do like Fish a lot. As a matter of fact, on the other one, I've got like one of my terminal emulators to go and just execute Fish automatically, so I can just use it.
Eris brought up a good point that it's not compatible, and ZSH is more compatible. And I've actually used ZSH recently and you can configure it to do a lot of the same things that Fish does. I'm just saying that because I thought the things in Fish were so interesting. But
what is it that's not compatible, Eris?
So everybody defaults to Bash, and like if you go on looking for a script, you'll easily find a Bash compatible script. That's not going to be compatible with Fish. CSH is more compatible, but I think Bash has Bashisms, which is like things that only Bash has. Is not compatible with POSIX either. So there's always that complication when it comes to scripting. I don't know if it's as powerful. I don't know. I've never done any scripting in Fish. There is a scripting language associated with it, but I'm not sure exactly how it works.
And I'm sorry, I was just going to say, Dan Simmons added that if you add Fish to your Bash RC, it helps with the problem that Penguin says he was having.
And POSIX is the way that, let's say, Mac OS, Linux, BSD, they all use that as a standard to communicate between each other in case you want to make something compatible. That's probably the easiest way.
Except Linux is not POSIX compatible, especially if you got System D now.
Well, not completely, but I mean, they still use it to do the scripting and other things.
Do you not like System D, Penguin?
No. I love System D. I'm just saying it's just not. If you're using System D, you're using a lot of tools that are not POSIX standard, because it replaces a lot of those POSIX tools with its own tools. So I was just a lot of people have corrected me down on my channel is that yes, Linux is technically not POSIX standard anymore because of System D.
GNU is not Unix.
Exactly. Yeah, and Linux isn't Unix either, but technically Mac OS is.
All right, so I have some gaming distro news. Lakka 4 has been released, and for those unfamiliar, Lakka is a lightweight Linux distribution that transforms a small computer into a full-blown retro gaming console. So I like retro gaming because I'm old. So The new release comes with support for various models of Raspberry Pi, Odroid, and Bernic, Allwinner, and more. It's built on top of RetroArch, allowing you to get tons of emulations and other things working quite easily. Some of what's new in Lakka 4 includes a new build system, RetroArch updated to 1.10.1, cores updated to the most recent versions, Mesa updated to 22.0.0, various kernel updates, depending on the device, added support for additional Allwinner and Amlogic devices, and Nintendo Switch complete rewrite of the port with many fixes and enhancements. And this is actually why I think this is interesting is, so the Nintendo Switch came out in what year? Adam, was it 2018 that it came out?
2017.
2017. Okay. So that hardware has been out for quite a while. At this point, do you think that emulation is catching up then? Like removing the unique competitive edge, I guess, of the Switch?
Say that again?
The Wii U was harder to emulate for quite a while because of its unique hardware configuration. But it seems like the Switch doesn't have the same kind of uniqueness as does the other, as its predecessor. So, and since it is getting long in the tooth now, it's 5 years old, it hasn't really had a refresh in the platform, really. I mean, an OLED screen, I guess, and we'll get some more memory or whatever. But it's not any faster. So do you think that emulation might actually be a better experience, or are we approaching a time when emulation of the Switch might be a better experience than running on the actual hardware?
Yeah, it won't take long for that to go into play, because you already have like a lot of modern hardware that can push Switch games through emulation to like high resolutions. I think I saw like Breath of the Wild that someone added ray tracing and such. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely already a thing.
So do you think that the Switch is in trouble, or Nintendo's in trouble, or do you think they have the market just because of their namesake?
No, I think they're fine. I think they're not that I mean, they're concerned with emulation from a piracy perspective, but not from like, oh no, people are making our games look better. Like they not even on their radar on that one. So I think they'll keep doing what they do, because you can take something like a Steam Deck and like take it portably and everything, but it's not the same as like playing the actual hardware. Even though you can push certain things beyond, like it's a matter of compatibility and ease of use, and that I don't think many people are going to stomach, especially like kids or people who just aren't computer people. Like they're just gonna be like, I just want to pop the cartridge in or download it and go. And so I think that value is still definitely there. I don't think Nintendo has to worry about emulation beyond piracy.
And how would you get that Switch game off of the cartridge onto? Like, is there a process for that?
Yeah, there are pieces of hardware that'll dump cartridges.
They're game cards, not quite a cartridge.
Yeah. There's plenty of like retro games also have like all the cartridge systems throughout the years. Like they're little devices that you can plug into your computer that have like the cartridge slot on them and maybe a USB cable, and you can use software to dump the ROM off of the cartridge onto your computer. It's actually a legal thing. That is completely legal for you to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's giving that ROM away is where the problem comes.
I know at least with the Switch, at least the way that the Yuzu devs tell you how to do it, you actually have to have a Switch in order to dump the ROMs from a card. So if you want to use Yuzu, then you either already have to have a Switch to dump your ROMs, or you have to pirate them. There is no in between.
Okay, so they would be running homebrew stuff.
Yeah, basically, because what you got to do is you got to get your firmware off, you got to get your keys off, and you got to get your ROMs off in order to actually be able to do basically anything.
Yeah, that makes sense now.
One thing I encountered was you have to make sure that if you do pirate, that your firmware that you're using and your keys are for the same version of firmware. So if you use keys that are for version like 10 and the firmware is version like 13, then some games will throw errors at you. So it is actually legitimately better if you just already have a Switch or have a friend who has a Switch who's willing to like give you a copy of their firmware and keys so that you can emulate.
Well, we're not going to do any piracy.
No, don't.
Because we don't get Nintendo after us.
It's all
So
for educational purposes only.
right, for educational purposes only. I was thinking just backing up your copy because you have kids that like to lose cartridges, and then you have to like dig through the couch and find them, and then they got lost somewhere in the contraption that causes the thing to lean out. It's just such a mess.
Or like sometimes when you sometimes when you've almost got all the Koroks in Breath of the Wild, and then you don't pick it up for a while, and then you go back and you realize somebody started a new game. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a couple of switches.
Yeah, for legal purposes, this was all for educational purposes. Because what you do with this information is not our responsibility. It is totally your responsibility. That is a disclaimer I always do when I'm doing emulation. Is like, I'm just providing you information. I'm not responsible for what you do with it.
Yeah, one of the cool things that has happened with the emulation technology over the years is once in a while you'll find somebody runs across a cart, like say a Sonic the Hedgehog 2 beta cart, right? And it's got all kinds of other things that were pre-release that didn't exist in the game. It didn't even exist if you went into the debug mode and you went in and found the other levels or whatnot. You can really, glean some information about, for historical purposes, this stuff down the road, like right now, like we were saying, is like, this is not something that Nintendo's worried about affecting their bottom line as far as, their general purpose, user. Like my wife, as soon as another Pokemon game comes out, take my money. That's exactly what she's going to say. She's not going to ask questions, none of it. And if at some point down the road she has to buy a new Switch or something else or whatever to do a thing, I'll get the hand-me-down. You know what I'm going to do with it, right? I'm gonna open it up and I'm gonna do all the fun things with it because I don't have any interest really. I'll play hers or on the Switch or the kids or whatever. But like down the road, we're gonna find these dev carts. We're gonna find these files that are from inside Nintendo, and we're gonna go, oh, that was what that was supposed to be, or that, and we're gonna be able to reconstruct entire levels. It'd be fun.
My thing is on video game preservation. So I view video games as a kind of an art form, among other things, but it's an art form of our generation. Emulation allows us to carry on that art that was created, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago in some cases, and being able to enjoy it today. Anna Rita in the chat was saying how she loves the NES because she's old, I guess. I don't know. I'm not one to judge, but I also enjoy those old games, and playing specifically for me, River City Ransom with my kids was a really fun time, and being able to enjoy those games all over again, but with my kids. And without emulation, I have the cartridge. I have a couple of cartridges actually. Without emulation, I wouldn't necessarily be able to enjoy it as well because the hardware is a little funny, but being able to have more things that you can play it on allows that art form to be enjoyed by more than those that just grew up with that particular piece of hardware. So I personally believe emulation is important for the preservation of the art form. And I mean, so much work is put into them today. I know that the PlayStation 4 emulator only works on Linux, which is interesting. A lot of work being done on that. And to me, that helps to preserve the fun. I think the PS4 has like 6 or 7 games that I know about. Preserve those for future generations.
Yeah, the other thing about preservation with Sega, there were so many different versions and releases of the original Sonic the Hedgehog games, and the soundtracks are different between the different releases, whether from the original carts to the Sonic and Knuckles collection and whatnot. There were copyright issues and all kinds of things with that in it. And you're not going to, and also when they re-released some of them, like Sonic CD that was rebuilt by Christian Whitehead, who did Sonic Mania, which was, also, I was a part of the original Sonic fan games community at one point early on in my computer, when I first had my first computer. So this guy was in those forums, but it's like his work was so much better on certain things, but the only way to get his code when he rebuilt it is to play it like on the mobile version. But so, yeah, when you're talking about preservation and you want to try to play these old games, maybe your system's dusty and you don't really want to mess with it because you don't want to, you want to preserve that. Sometimes those games don't run as well on the Sega. They had downclocked. They actually had little actual crystals on the motherboard for the Sega. I know way too much about the Genesis, but anyway.
Yeah, me too. Also, when it comes to older hardware and dusting off that old machine, if you don't have any old CRT TVs, sometimes they're not even going to work that well with those newest TV sets. And sometimes you might not even have the right inputs. You
can't play Duck Hunt without a CRT.
No, you can't.
It's true, because HDMI is too slow.
Yeah, and no, it also has something to do with the light gun too. The light gun only works.
Yeah, it's too slow. So what happens is the way the light gun works is it looks for the exact moment for because basically it inverts it and you see like a little white box or whatever whenever you shoot. And if the light gun sees that white box, then it will register it. But because there's enough of a delay with between that digital conversion that it misses when it's looking, the HDMI then a digital screen will show it after it's actually scanned for it. So there is a way to slow down the Nintendo to match it, but it's like a converter box to make it work. But it is possible, but it does take some extra hardware to make that work. So you have to slow the Nintendo down to modern technology. Just keep that in mind.
Which is kind of a weird way of putting it, because you would think that modern technology would be faster, but not necessarily.
There's latency in it.
I think Time Crisis had an issue with that too.
Yeah, the old analog stuff was more immediate. I do play. So Bumwolf made a comment that the old consoles look awful on modern TVs. So I have a really nice device, an older device from ViewSonic, and that converts it to a digital signal that I can run, and it actually, it's like an upscaler sort of, but not really. But it works with PAL or NTSC, and will work on. I can then fire it off to a digital screen. So right now I have it going to an old, ironically, my old CAD monitor, which is a 21-inch CRT monitor. So I like it. Works well for me. It's the right shade of beige.
Ironically, my Sega Dreamcast works fine with modern TVs. It's just funny.
Some things are. That's good stuff. So I want to thank Michael for providing this this news flight. I appreciate him taking the time to put it together for me so we can muddle our way through it. And so those are news topics that came from This Week in Linux, and I appreciate him mixing up a great flight of topics. So it is that time for last call. If anybody has anything they want to contribute, talk about anything that they have going on, coming up that they want to talk about, please feel free. I know, Colin, you just released a video on the YouTubes. I haven't watched it yet. It caught me at a bad time when I was driving to and from the Chicagoland area. So I don't know if you want to maybe talk about that just in brief, and then Eris is great about piping in links in the YouTube chat, so you can throw that in there as well.
That was just about menu entries to two applications, one called Menu Libre and the other one called a la carte. And I'm pretty sure a la carte's been around a lot longer than Menu Libre. Somebody might be able to correct me on that. But Menu Libre, I use it to update my Arch system. Instead of opening in a terminal and typing in the sudo pacman -SYU, I just put it in the command, choose to open it in terminal, and it becomes like an application on the system. So that's just how I update the system. It's nice, easy, and smooth way of updating rather than typing in a terminal or arrow upping and stuff like that. So that's what that was all about.
Okay.
And it touched a little bit on alias as well. So
excellent.
Yeah, I found Menu Libre is probably better searching for icons on the system. A la carte's not as good with that. I don't know if anyone knows much about a la carte. I know it's been around for a long time, but nice little programs.
Yeah, that's what whenever I go to like a cafeteria, I usually get a la carte myself. So.
Menu editors, that's what they are.
Oh, okay. So I also put a link to your video in the chat as well.
Thanks.
So now Rick is not here, but Rick is not a Linux guru. He has a Wednesday night stream. You should check that out if you want to like have a low key stream. Mark, you still have the Atlanta Linux users group.
Yep, the Atlanta Linux users group. We are meeting in person and online tomorrow.
Wow.
Each Sunday we help users with kind of whatever Linux topic they may have, any troubles they're having. You can get that information at ale.org, ale.org. Again, we are meeting in person tomorrow, but we're going to continue the online, and we're going to try to do a simulcast or hybrid event. And then if you want to catch us in a future Sunday, it's 3 to 6 each Sunday, U.S. Eastern.
How are you doing the mixed live, in person and virtual? Are you gonna have like wherever you're having the actual live event? Are you gonna have like some giant screen there so people can see all the faces or avatars of people that want to participate as well? Or how are you actually accomplishing that? Because I'm interested in like the mixing.
Yeah, we're gonna have. We tried it before where we had like a conference room mic and on two tables and a television, but we meet at a restaurant, and we don't want to disturb the restaurant folks. So tomorrow we're going to try a little bit different hybrid event. We'll have each member will have their laptop camera on, and it's just like a Zoom here. We'll be able to see each one's face, and then the audio will probably come through a central location.
Well, very cool. So check that out tomorrow from 3 p.m. to
6 U.S. Eastern.
Okay.
Again,
Excellent.
you would bring any topic you need help with Linux.
We're glad you're still doing that.
Yep.
Steve, are you doing your stream tomorrow?
I hope so. I have nothing planned. I have nothing set up yet.
Yeah, but that's every
Work on
week.
that after the. I usually have a little something planned, but
Zing!
I have nothing ready.
So you had a really good topic. Like couple. It was the couple weeks ago, I think it was. We actually copied that for Linux Out Loud. It was the shoot. I can't remember what it was called now, but boy, my fleeting mind. Anyway, but we actually used one of your topics for Linux Out Loud, and it kind of gave our takes on it. So I'm expecting to come up with something good.
Easy one. Or...
It could be. It was an article, and it said what would it take to make Linux like take to the next level or whatever along those lines.
Okay.
So we pay attention to what you're doing, and come up with something good again. Makes our show planning so much easier.
Once a month or so,
Yeah, Penguin, you got something?
I actually raised my hand. I did not realize I did that, but yeah, I do actually. Starting this week, I'm actually going to start taking a second closer look into Peppermint OS, and I'm actually going to be doing some tutorials on how to get everything set up, at least in my opinion, how I think it should be set up. But that's basically what I'm going to be doing over the next few weeks on my channel. So
if you have a link to that, share it to your channel. Thomas.
So next Saturday, I will not be here, but that's because Draugr OS is having another beta release next Saturday. Big thing this time is the default file system is being changed from ext4 to Btrfs.
Oh.
And that's not just for the root file system, that's also for the home partition. So if you have it automatically partitioning anything or making a RAID array, it's Btrfs across the board. That's the big thing with this beta release. So I think the stable release, which will be coming in, that'll be April, so then June, That stable release is going to be pretty ballin' because we're going to be using Pipewire and Btrfs. The only thing we're not going to have that's bleeding edge is Wayland for obvious reasons.
Because it's not supporting XFCE yet.
Yet.
I'm gonna come judge your Pipewire setup.
I mean, it's a pretty bog standard Pipewire setup. The only modification that we've done is there's a file that we put into the user's home directory that makes it so that anything that tries to connect to ALSA gets instead redirected to Pulse Audio, but because we're not using Pulse Audio, it's connected to Pipewire.
That's because Pipewire masquerades and everything is compatible.
Right. The reason we did that is because I actually had a video game that connected directly to ALSA. And when it did that and the game closed, if I reopened the game would no longer connect to ALSA because Pipewire freaks out and goes, oh no, something else is connecting to ALSA. I'm supposed to have exclusive connection, nothing else now. And so I'm just like, just don't bother. Just connect directly to Pipe. You're good.
So one of these days we're gonna have to actually review Draugr OS and tell you like and hurt your feelings or something. I'm kidding, of course. I say that in jest.
If you do, let me know, and I might be able to get some of the other contributors on here. No guarantees, but maybe.
That'd be great. It's on the list.
So speaking of the list, Nate, what do we got for next week?
Oh yeah, I mean, I totally biffed that, didn't I? So see, without you, Steve, I don't know what I would do. So next week it's an open mic night. So whatever topics you might have across the network, it could be just some discussions, community things, anything. Bring it up. Do a little hashtag open mic night in the Telegram, Discord, or Matrix rooms, and we will put it on the list for things to discuss. We'll be taking things from the discourse forum, so you can put open mic night, hashtag open mic night in the discourse forum as well, and we will bring attention to that and may bring it up as part of the topic. Hopefully, some more people will join, from the discourse forum as well. So thank you, Steve, for bailing me out. And then tomorrow, Destination Linux is streaming live at 1 p.m. Eastern tomorrow afternoon. What exactly they're talking about, I don't know, because they don't share those notes with me. But if Michael were on here, he would tell us.
Either, so it just doesn't matter.
Well, sometimes they plan. And then Linux User Space, the new episode drops tomorrow.
Yes, I think Linux User Space is going to be their season finale. Going to be taking a break. They're going to look back on the season and look forward what's going to happen next season, maybe.
That's exciting. It's such a fun show to listen to. I think Dan and Leo have such great banter between them. I feel like they're like a kite. Dan is Dan is the string that keeps the kite from flying away. Is kind of how I feel, and I really enjoy it a lot.
I enjoy this. And
then Linux Out Loud. Oh, so it was last time we talked. 5 things Linux needs to seriously compete in the desktop market. That was a topic that was stolen from Steve's show, and so we do give you credit for that in the show, Steve. So that'll drop on Wednesday. And then if you want more on me, go to cubiclenight.com. I do things. So I want to thank you all for being part of the conversation in both the Zoom meeting and in the YouTube stream, as well as everyone for watching the show after the fact. I want to thank everyone involved in making the Linux and open source tools possible for us to not only have this conversation, but to enjoy, have fun with our technology, and really own it. Linux truly puts personal back in a personal computer. Thank you for stopping by. Be sure to tip your developers, and please remember, always to Linux responsibly. Until next time, see yous.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good evening.
Bye.
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 And we're off.
Can I get it to like